Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Marcus always operated under the assumption that his marriage to Sophie was like the foundation of the high-rise building he currently sat in. Structural, immovable, and immune to the changing weather outside. They had been together for 8 years. In Marcus's mind, the friction between them was not a crack in the foundation, but merely the settling of the house. A common phase that every couple endured, once the initial dopamine of romance faded into the gray reality of mortgage payments and career ladders. It was 30 minutes past midnight. The office was silent, save for the hum of the central heating and the rhythmic clacking of Marcus's keyboard. He was a senior logistics analyst, a man whose life revolved around efficiency, supply chains, and predicting risks for major corporations. He was excellent at predicting risk in shipping lanes and warehouse distribution. Yet, he remained aggressively blind to the risks within his own home. He believed the problem was the workload. He told himself that Sophie's recent silence, the way her gaze would drift past him at the dinner table, was simply a reflection of his own exhaustion. He convinced himself that once this quarter was over, once the restructuring of the chaotic Midwest supply chain was complete, they would go back to normal. Sophie was 32 years old. When they met, she was a vibrant landscape designer, full of color and noise. Now, she seemed like a pastel drawing left out in the sun too long. Marcus had catalogued this change as maturity. He saw her lack of arguments not as detachment, but as peace. He saw her separate sleeping schedule not as avoidance, but as a pragmatic solution to his late nights. He was typing the final paragraph of a projection report when his phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. The sound was harsh in the quiet room. He checked the time. 51 minutes past midnight. Marcus frowned. He expected a notification from the server, or perhaps a spam email. Instead, a text message banner lit up the screen. The sender was Sophie. His body reacted before his mind did. His stomach tightened. Sophie never texted this late. Usually, she was asleep by 10 o'clock. He unlocked the phone. The message was short, devoid of grammar, and terrifyingly direct. I need you. Urgent. Please come to this address. Below the text was a location pin. There were no emojis. No I love you. No, I'm sorry to bother you. Just the raw data of a command. Marcus stared at the screen. His analytical mind tried to categorize the threat. Car accident? Unlikely. The car was in the shop, and she had been using rideshares. Medical emergency? The address wasn't a hospital. It was in the garment district, a part of the city known for warehouses and low-end transient hotels. He stood up, grabbing his keys and his coat. He left the computer on, the report unfinished. The cursor blinked on the screen, a heartbeat that would continue without him. As he walked to the elevator, he dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. The unreliable nature of his perception began to fracture. He told himself she must have gone to help a friend. Maybe her sister was in trouble. He refused to let the darker, more obvious variable enter his calculation. He pressed the button for the parking garage, his hand trembling slightly. He told himself it was just the caffeine. The drive to the address took 20 minutes. The streets of the city were slick with rain, reflecting the streetlights in distorted streaks of orange and white. Inside the car, the silence was deafening. Marcus gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His mind, usually so good at organizing chaos, was now a battlefield of conflicting theories. He thought about Sophie. At 32, she was still beautiful, though she often hid it under oversized sweaters and messy buns. He remembered their conversation 2 weeks ago. She had asked him if he was happy. He had answered, I'm productive, Sophie. We have a good life. He hadn't asked her if she was happy. He assumed the we covered both of them. Was she hurt? Was she being held against her will? Then, a darker thought intruded, one he had suppressed for months. He thought of the weekends he spent at the office. He thought of the emptiness of their house. He thought of Daniel. Daniel was Marcus's younger brother, 29 years old. A pharmaceutical sales rep who possessed all the charisma Marcus lacked, and none of the responsibility. Daniel was the one who stopped by the house on Tuesday afternoons, just to check in. Daniel was the one who listened to Sophie talk about her stalled career, while Marcus was on conference calls in the study. Marcus had encouraged it. Keep her company, he had told Daniel once. She gets lonely when I travel. He had viewed this arrangement as efficient. He was outsourcing the emotional labor he didn't have the bandwidth to provide. Utilizing a trusted family resource. He had seen himself as a benevolent husband, ensuring his wife had a friend. Now, as the GPS directed him toward a rundown area of the city, that logic tasted like ash in his mouth. No, he thought. Not Daniel. They are just friends. Daniel is family. Sophie is loyal. He clung to this. He rationalized the glances he had seen between them at Thanksgiving. Glances that lingered a second too long. He rationalized the way Sophie laughed at Daniel's jokes. A laugh he hadn't heard directed at himself in years. He had told himself it was brotherly affection. To think otherwise would require him to admit that his logistical management of his marriage had been a catastrophic failure. He arrived at the destination at 2 o'clock. And 7 minutes in the morning. It was the Starlight Inn. The name was a cruel joke. It was a discreet, crumbling brick building squeezed between a boarded-up electronics store and a liquor shop. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Or when they couldn't afford to go anywhere else. Marcus sat in his car for a moment. The engine idling. He stared at the entrance. The reality was beginning to override his denial. A wife does not summon her husband to a transient hotel at 2 in the morning, because of a flat tire. He turned off the engine. The silence returned. Heavier than before. He stepped out into the cold rain, his suit jacket offering little protection. He felt like an intruder in a world he didn't understand. A world of shadows. And secrets. He walked to the reception. The lobby smelled of stale tobacco and industrial cleaner. The receptionist, a man with heavy eyelids and a stained shirt, didn't even ask for ID. He looked at Marcus, a man in a tailored suit, and then looked at the guest list. Room 204, the receptionist said. Before Marcus could even speak. They're waiting. They. The plural pronoun hit Marcus like a physical blow. He didn't ask who they were. He walked toward the stairs. The elevator was out of order. Every step. Up the carpeted stairs. Kicked up dust and the scent of old mistakes. Marcus counted the steps. 1, 2, 3. It was a coping mechanism. If he counted, he didn't have to feel. His heart was hammering against his ribs. An irregular rhythm that defied his calm exterior. He reached the second floor. The hallway was narrow, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that gave everything a sickly green cast. He saw room 204. The door was slightly ajar. A wedge of yellow light spilled out onto the dirty carpet. It was a setup. Not a criminal one, but an emotional one. Someone had left that door open because they couldn't bear the physical act of opening it when he knocked. They wanted the barrier removed. Before he even arrived, Marcus stopped 3 feet from the door. He heard breathing. It was ragged. Wet. The sound of someone who had been crying for hours. Curiosity is a strange affliction. Even when you know the answer will destroy you. You have to look. You have to verify the data. He pushed the door open with his fingertips. The room was small. A peeling wallpaper of faded flowers. A single window with heavy curtains drawn tight. And there they were. Sophie was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress. Her face was buried in her hands. Her shoulders shaking violently. She wore a coat he didn't recognize. Huddled into herself as if freezing. Next to her, sitting on a wooden chair that looked too fragile to hold his weight, was Daniel, Marcus's brother. Daniel sat with his head between his knees, his hands clasping the back of his neck. He looked small, defeated. The visual confirmation of the data point Marcus had ignored for so long was blinding. The friendship, the Tuesday visits, the shared laughter. It all aligned instantly into a coherent, horrifying pattern. Marcus didn't scream. He didn't storm in. He stood in the doorway. A statue of a businessman. Clutching his car keys until the metal bit into his palm. Sophie looked up. Her eyes were swollen. The red capillaries bursting against the whites. Her face was a map of desperation. When she saw him, she stood up, almost knocking over a lamp. "Marcus," she choked out. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was thin, high, and terrified. Daniel didn't look up immediately. He stayed hunched over. A posture of absolute shame. "I needed you," Sophie said. The words tumbling out fast, nonsensical. "I didn't know who else to call. It got out of control." Marcus stepped into the room. And closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. The air in the room was thick. Suffocating. It smelled of cheap soap. And despair. "Explain," Marcus said. His voice was calm. It terrified him how calm it was. It was the voice he used when firing an incompetent junior analyst. Sophie fell to her knees. It was a melodramatic gesture. One that Marcus found distasteful. Yet he couldn't look away. She reached for his hand. But he took a step back. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she sobbed. "It started. We were just talking. You were always away, Marcus. You were always at the office. I was so lonely. I felt like a ghost in that big house." She was shifting the liability. Marcus noted this. In her narrative. His absence was the cause. Her infidelity. The effect. Daniel listened, she continued. Looking toward the man still hunched in the chair. He understood. "We started meeting for coffee. Then lunch. Then. Here. Here," Marcus repeated. "In a $15 a night hotel. We wanted to stop," Sophie pleaded. "We tried. But we fell in love, Marcus. Or we thought we did. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." Daniel finally lifted his head. His face was pale. His eyes hollow. He looked at his older brother. And for the first time, Marcus saw a stranger. "I'm sorry, Mark," Daniel rasped. His voice sounded like it was dragging over gravel. "I don't have an excuse. I'm a piece of trash. I know that." "You are," Marcus agreed. He didn't raise his voice. "You're my brother. You spent Christmas at my table. You drank my wine. You listened to me talk about my retirement plans. With her. I tried to leave," Daniel said, tears leaking from his eyes. "I tried to cut it off. But she." He stopped. Looking at Sophie. "Don't blame her," Marcus said cold. Cutting him off. "You are an adult, Daniel. You made a choice every single time you touched her." Marcus looked at the two of them. The sheer pathetic nature of the scene was overwhelming. They weren't powerful villains destroying his life. They were two weak, selfish people. Who had made a mess. And were now crying because the bill had come due. But there was something else. A tension that went beyond the discovery of the affair. Sophie was hyperventilating. She wasn't just sad. She was terrified. "Why am I here?" Marcus asked. "If you wanted to leave me for him, you could have left a note. You could have served papers. Why bring me to this sewer in the middle of the night?" Sophie looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the floor. "Tell him," Daniel whispered. Sophie turned her gaze back to Marcus. She grabbed the hem of his trousers. Her knuckles white. "There's something else," she said. "Something worse." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. He had assumed the infidelity was the bottom of the well. He was wrong. "I'm pregnant," Sophie said. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The world narrowed down to a tunnel vision, focused entirely on Sophie's tear-streaked face. "Pregnant," he repeated. "I found out 3 days ago," she whispered. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Marcus looked at Daniel. The younger man was shaking now. His hands gripping his own knees so hard his fingernails were turning blue. "Whose is it?" Marcus asked. The silence that followed was the answer. "I don't know," Sophie confessed. Her voice breaking into a wail. You and I, we were trying again last month. Remember? The weekend you took off? And I was with Daniel the week before." She looked up at him. Begging for a solution. begging for him to be the man who fixes things. Just as he had always been. I don't know who the father is, Marcus. I swear. This was the variable that broke the model. Adultery was painful. Betrayal by a brother was agonizing. But this was a permanent, biological scar on reality. A child that could be his. Or could be his nephew. A child that would forever be a monument to this deception. Something snapped in Marcus. The calm analyst vanished. He moved across the room in a blur. He grabbed Daniel by the throat. Daniel didn't fight back. He was lighter than Marcus. Weaker. Marcus slammed him against the wall. The plaster cracked. A picture frame fell and shattered. You parasitic coward, Marcus snarled. Squeezing. He felt the pulse under his thumbs. He wanted to extinguish it. He wanted to crush the source of this chaos. Sophie screamed. She clawed at Marcus's arm. Stop. You'll kill him. Marcus, stop. Marcus didn't hear her. He stared into Daniel's eyes. And that was when he saw it. Daniel wasn't struggling. He wasn't gasping for air in panic. His arms hung limp at his sides. His eyes were locked on Marcus's. And they were filled with a dark, twisted relief. He wants this, Marcus realized. Daniel wanted to be beaten. He wanted Marcus to break his jaw. To choke the life out of him. Why? Because physical pain was a transaction. If Marcus beat him to a pulp, Daniel could tell himself he had paid for his sins. He could play the victim. He could say, yes, I did wrong, but look what he did to me. Punishment would be a release for Daniel. It would balance the ledger. Marcus's grip froze. He looked at his brother's pathetic, waiting face. He looked at the surrender. No, Marcus thought. I will not give you the satisfaction of absolution. He released his grip. Daniel slumped to the floor. Coughing. Gasping for air. Clutching his throat. He looked up at Marcus. Confused. Almost disappointed. Marcus stepped back. Wiping his hands on his suit jacket as if he had touched something infectious. He turned to Sophie. She was sobbing uncontrollably. Holding her stomach. It's over, Marcus said. His voice was devoid of emotion now. The anger had burned out. Replaced by a cold, Arctic clarity. Marcus, please, Sophie begged. We can do a test. If it's yours. It doesn't matter, Marcus cut her off. If it's mine. I will support the child financially because the law requires it, if it's his. He looked at Daniel, who was wheezing on the floor. Then you two deserve each other. I can't raise a baby alone, Sophie cried. I don't love him, Marcus. It was a mistake. I want us. There is no use, Marcus said. The US you are talking about was a fiction. It was a lie I told myself to get through the work week, and a lie you lived to pay the bills. He looked at them one last time. The crying wife. The broken brother. The dingy hotel room. You figure it out, he said. He walked out of room 204. He walked down the hallway. Down the stairs. And past the sleeping receptionist. When he stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air was freezing, biting at his exposed skin. He took a deep breath. It hurt. But it felt clean. He got into his car and drove. He didn't go back to the house. He couldn't bear to see the wedding photos. The furniture they had bought together. The guest room where Daniel had slept. He drove to his office. It was 3:30 in the morning. The building was empty. Security let him in without a word. He went up to his floor. Walked into his office. And closed the door. He turned off the overhead lights and sat on the leather sofa in the corner. He didn't sleep. He sat there, staring at the city lights, waiting for the sun to rise. The next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, he called his lawyer. I need to file for divorce, Marcus said. Irreconcilable differences. No counseling. Fast track. And the assets? The lawyer asked. Sell the house, Marcus said. Split the proceeds. I don't care about the numbers. I just want the contract terminated. The months that followed were a blur of legal paperwork and logistical dismantling. Marcus refused to meet Sophie in person. All communication went through the lawyers. He learned through the grapevine relatives who called to whisper and gossip that Sophie and Daniel had moved in together. Mostly out of necessity. Sophie's pregnancy was difficult. Daniel had lost his job, word of the scandal had reached his company. Or perhaps he just fell apart. When the baby was born, a paternity test was conducted. It was a boy. The father was Daniel. When the lawyer called Marcus with the result, Marcus was packing the last box in his apartment. He was transferring to the Zurich branch of his firm. A promotion. A new continent. The test confirmed it, the lawyer said. It's your brother's child. Okay, Marcus said. Closes the file. Send the final bill. Are you okay, Marcus? The lawyer asked, stepping out of his professional persona for a moment. I am efficient, Marcus replied. He hung up. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel relief. He felt weightless. He thought about Sophie and Daniel. They were tied together now. Forever bound by a child born of betrayal, poverty, and shame. Sophie had trapped herself with a man she didn't respect. Daniel was trapped with a woman who wished he was someone else. Their punishment wasn't a beating. It was their life. Together. Marcus picked up his suitcase. He took one last look at the city of Chicago. The city where he had built a foundation on sand. He walked out the door, leaving the keys on the counter. He didn't look back. There was no anger left in the system. Only the cold, hard data of a lesson learned. Some investments are bad. You write them off. You liquidate. You move on. He headed for the airport. A man alone. But for the first time in 8 years. A man who was seeing clearly. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.